Proverbs 26, verses 17 to 28, the overall counsel is that foolish words are like fuel to the fires of destruction. This section is all about the incredible damage to ourselves and to others caused by evil lips. And the irony is, sometimes fools think that these words will actually help the situation, but it only makes things worse. And I'm getting the flame imagery from verses 18 to 23, where he mentions firebrands, which are like torches. He mentions fuel sources for fire like wood and charcoal, and he mentions burning lips. So foolish words are pictured as not only starting fires, but making existing fires even stronger. So for instance, in verse 17, someone might look at a conflict between two people and think, I can solve this, and so they insert themselves into the situation. But it doesn't make anything better because it's not their business. It's like watching a wild dog pass by, and instead of just letting him go, you grab onto his ears and get bit in the process. It was unnecessary. All you had to do was just let the dog go his own way and not get involved. And yet for no apparent reason, you got involved in a situation you had no business being involved in and only made things worse for yourself and for the others involved. In verses 18 and 19, he talks about a madman throwing firebrands, which were torches used to light things on fire, and he's shooting people through with arrows and killing them. And he compares this to a man who deceives his neighbor and says, was I not joking? This is like someone who plays a prank on his neighbor, but it's a serious prank that ends up hurting them in some way. And then when the neighbor gets mad at them, they say, lighten up. It was only a joke. Or maybe they insult people in deep, cutting ways. And then when the person gets offended, they say, I was just teasing. Don't be so sensitive. Sometimes we use very hurtful words, or we do very harmful things, and then we pretend like it's harmless so that we don't have to take accountability for it. And all we're doing is lighting people around us on fire. In verse 20, a fool keeps the fires of destruction going through gossip and rumors. And one of the things that makes gossip so destructive is because it's so pleasing to the hearer. In verse 22, they're like dainty morsels that go down into the innermost parts of the body. There's something satisfying about being in the know and having inside information and having dirt on people. But all it does is ruin people's relationships because it changes the way they look at the person being gossiped about. And now the person who's gossiped about is going to have strained relationships with everyone that has heard the gossip about them. And so these words are like a fire that burns the whole community down. So too, in verse 21, starting fights is like starting a fire. And one of the things that makes foolish, evil words so destructive is that people can't always tell if those words are destructive or not. The wicked have the ability to conceal their evil motives and to use flattery and manipulation to make you think that what they're saying is good, when in reality, it's incredibly destructive. So in verse 23, it's like an earthen vessel overlaid with silver dross. So it's shiny on the outside, but on the inside, it's plain. Likewise, if someone has fiery lips and a wicked heart, their words may seem beautiful on the outside, but on the inside, it's corrupt. And an evil fool may say that they like you and give you compliments, but in verse 24, he actually hates you in his heart. And you should not believe him in verse 25 because he's using his words to cover up the truth of what he actually thinks and feels. And God says, even though in verse 26, he covers his hatred with clever disguises, eventually it's going to come out. And when his wickedness is exposed for all to see, you will feel humiliated for believing and following the words of a fool. Eventually, the fool with evil lips, setting fire to the community around him, will ultimately set fire to himself. What he dishes out to others will eventually be turned back on him by the Lord. He who digs a pit will fall into it, verse 27, and he who rolls a stone, it will come back on him. And I think the point of verse 28 is that the ones crushed by the lying tongue And ruined by the flattering mouth are the liars and the flatterers. Their destructive words in the end will destroy them. And so the practice for us is to never underestimate how destructive our words can be. In James chapter 3, in verses 5 and 6, he says, "The tongue is a small part of the body, and yet it boasts of great things. See how great a forest is set aflame by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, the very world of iniquity. The tongue is set among our members as that which defiles the entire body and sets on fire the course of our life and is set on fire by hell." There is no stronger indictment against the power of words to destroy, and yet we say things today like "sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." That's not biblical. Words are incredibly hurtful, and so we need to be mindful in all of our interactions with others about how our words come across. And sometimes the words sound good in our heads, but then when they come out, they're like flames, setting everyone on fire around us. And that's especially true in our digital age, where we can type things to people, but they cannot see our facial expressions or hear our tone of voice. And so we think that they're going to receive these words well, but we're just burning them in the process. Other times our keyboard gives us the boldness to say harsh things to people that we would never say to them in person. And so we burn them down because we feel safer to do so from afar. And so if we've hurt people with our words, we need to be quick to apologize and break out the fire extinguisher by asking them for forgiveness. And we need to stop thinking that just because we're kidding, it's okay to say whatever we want to say, because many a truth is told in jest. And sometimes we say what's really on our hearts and minds, which is incredibly hurtful to a person. But then if they get angry with us, we backtrack and try to cover ourselves by saying it was just a joke. Not everyone has the same sense of humor, and not everything we say in jest is actually a jest. We also need the humility to realize I am not the mediator between everyone else's problems. I don't have to insert myself and share my wisdom to try to bring peace between people. Yes, Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers." But we also need the wisdom and discernment to determine if it's our role to bring peace in this situation and not act like everything is our business. And this all points to Christ, because he was incredibly careful with his words. He used his words to bring life and encouragement and to express love. He never used his words to burn people or to set his community on fire. Even when he spoke harshly to the Pharisees, he was not doing so maliciously. And even as the Messiah, he understood there were some affairs that were not his business. In fact, in Luke 12, when two people were arguing about their father's inheritance, they wanted Jesus to get involved, and Jesus said, "That's not my business. Who made me a judge and arbiter over you in this case?" Jesus knew getting involved in a family financial feud would be like taking a dog by the ears. And then he said in Matthew 12 and verse 36, "I tell you that every careless word that people speak, they shall give an accounting for it in the day of judgment." Notice Jesus doesn't say that we'll be judged for our evil words. That's also true, of course. But he says we'll be judged for our careless words. Speaking without considering the feelings of others will absolutely earn God's condemnation, because Jesus understood even if we don't mean to hurt people with our words can still hurt. And foolish words are like fuel for the fires of destruction, the destruction of the community around us and our own destruction when we face God's judgment for it in the end. So as we call on God for wisdom today, our prayer is, "Father, help me be careful with the words that I use. Help me never underestimate their power to hurt people in my life, and help me, like Jesus, to speak words of life."